Camille, the woman who sang her own soul. When I first began researching women artists in France during the 1960s, I stumbled upon a story that pierced me in a way I wasn't expecting. It was one of those quiet stories, easy to overlook, but carrying the entire weight of a life spent fighting to exist. That's how I found Camille. Her name appeared only in fragments, a few letters, a scribbled note in an archive, a photograph without a caption. And yet, as I followed those faint traces, I felt something uncannily familiar, as if her voice had been echoing inside my own memory long before I knew her. Camille was born in 1946 in Nantes, raised in a family that believed women should fit into delicate molds rather than break them. But Camille was born uncontained. As a child, she would sneak into the attic to sing, hiding from a mother terrified that music, especially American music, Janis wasn't just a singer. She was an artistic force of nature. In the 1960s, art was shedding its skin everywhere. The United States was drowning in rebellion. The birth of psychedelic rock, the revival of electric blues, the rise of artists who sang with broken voices and bleeding hearts. Janis emerged in that fire, raw, unashamed, and fearless. Her voice carried the ghosts of Bessie Smith and Big Mama Thornton, channeling decades of blues into something wild and new. She didn't sing notes, she tore them open. Her presence on stage was a collision between performance art, ritual, and confession. Nothing about her was polished. Her curls, her beads, her trembling arms, her cracked voice. But everything about her was true. That truth crossed the ocean, and Camille received it like a revelation. Meanwhile, France in the 60s was its own boiling cauldron of artistic revolt. Paris pulsed like a restless heart. Cinema shattered conventions. The Nouvelle Vague made the camera human, shaky, and intimate. Painters abandoned classical beauty and dipped their brushes into chaos and instinct. Poets filled cafes with existential storms, and young artists etched their protests onto the city walls, turning the streets into a living gallery of disobedience. Art no longer wanted to decorate the world. It wanted to ignite it. Camille, barely 18, ran away to Paris with a small suitcase and a heart full of defiance. She rented a tiny attic room in Montmartre, where the water was cold and the nights were colder. By day, she worked as a waitress. By night, she followed the sound of guitars and revolution into underground clubs, literary cellars, smoky cellars, and basements where artists gathered like conspirators. It was in one of those basements, a former wine cellar now lit by melting candles, that Camille stepped onto a stage for the first time. Her voice trembled, her hands shook, and she sang like someone apologizing for taking up space. But somewhere in the back of the room, a woman whispered, "She has truth." That was the spark Camille needed. She began studying French art not through textbooks, but through living bodies and breathing canvases. She watched expressionist painters smear their emotions like wounds on the wall. She observed experimental dancers who used their bodies as political declarations. She immersed herself in films that fractured time and reason. She absorbed heated debates about women's liberation, artistic autonomy, and the right to break silence. Parallel to that, Camille dove deep into the artistic world of Janis Joplin. She studied how Janis fused classic blues with psychedelic rock, how she used imperfection as power, how she turned vulnerability into performance. Camille often said Janis sang as if she were tearing open the space between her heart and the world. And Camille wanted to do the same, not to imitate Janis, but to find her own inner rupture. But the road was brutal. One producer told her bluntly, Women should sing softly, sweetheart. Your roughness doesn't sell. Camille walked out humiliated but unbroken. If Janis had survived the vicious misogyny of the American rock scene, Camille would survive the French version of it. Slowly, Camille's voice transformed. It remained raw, grainy, almost wounded, but now it carried intention. Her style wasn't delicate, it was visceral, and people began to notice. Soon, her late-night shows packed with young artists who saw in her voice the same unfiltered desperation that defined their generation. Critics began calling her the raw voice of Paris. Some said her singing felt like a painting by Jean Dubuffet. Chaotic, violent, unrefined, and alive. In the pivotal year of 1968, when students filled the streets with barricades and revolution, Camille joined an artistic movement that blended music with emotional protest. She sang in courtyards, on barricades, in squats turned into temporary people's theaters. Her performances weren't concerts. They were acts of emotional rebellion. During that time, Camille wrote a line that became symbolic among underground women artists in Paris. "I do not sing to be heard, I sing to exist." That sentence wasn't just hers. It belonged to every woman whose voice had been ignored, dismissed, or softened to please others. Camille never became famous in the traditional sense. She didn't have a manager. She never recorded a studio album. Her legacy lived in whispers, in living rooms, in memories of late-night crowds who swore they had witnessed something raw and unforgettable. She didn't want stardom. She wanted liberation. Today, as I revisit her story, I realize that Camille never aimed to be Janis Joplin. She aimed to be Camille. Janis was the spark, but the fire was entirely her own. For me, Camille embodies one of the deepest truths of feminine art: that creation does not need to be perfect to be powerful. That a woman's voice can be an entire universe. And that our muses are not there to be copied, but to awaken what has always been waiting inside us. If this story touched you the way it touched me, follow me here on Woman BioArt and stay with me as we continue uncovering women, real, imagined, and archetypal, who turned their existence into art.